Hi everybody, Sarah here from Heart and Dash, a wedding planning company based on the East Coast where we specialize in planning weddings for non-traditional couples. Today I want to touch base on a topic that is often overlooked by our couples, often overgeneralized by wedding blogs, and often a topic of conversation that is just plain dreaded: tipping your wedding vendors. When it comes to talking about money, people tend to clam up. For whatever reason, it's a taboo topic in their household, they're nervous to talk to their parents about it, or it's just something they're avoiding altogether. Whatever the reasons may be, it's gotta stop. You gotta talk about money. It's a hard, cold fact when it comes to wedding planning. Talking about money and having a reasonable budget is what's going to help really prevent those post-wedding financial blues for you. Vendor tipping is one of the things that is most commonly forgotten in a budget and is often put off to the week before your wedding. When you do that, you tend to freak out about it, you tend to tip more than you anticipated, and it's not something that's thought out, it's more reactionary versus proactive. So in this video, we are going to review how much we suggest tipping each vendor, when to tip them, how to tip them, and some of our top tipping tips. Let's preface talking about tipping by talking about the big picture. Gratuity literally means gift, present, reward. Therefore, it's our belief that tipping should not be something that is expected by any vendor. That being said, within the wedding industry, there is a difference between what is expected and what is customary. The information in this video is here to shed some light on rewarding excellent service that goes above and beyond. Just like at a restaurant, you would not reward a server for a lackluster performance or not even meeting your standards, same rules apply here. Now, all that being said, there are some exceptions to the rule within the wedding industry where vendors not only expect tips but have them required as part of their contract or proposal. This is mainly due to tax purposes. Certain vendors who have a high-arching company then subcontract or freelance several of their artists, vendors, things like that. And so tipping goes directly to the artist and or vendor versus going to that overarching company. So it's really important to review each of your contracts and proposals and see if this is something that is expected of you. Mainly this happens with transportation, catering, and hair and makeup. One of our biggest suggestions to our couples is to prepare your tips in advance. Don't save it to last minute. Grab some envelopes, take your cash, divide the tips accordingly by vendor, label, seal, and then hand that stack of envelopes off to your wedding planner or coordinator, or if you don't have either of those, a designated responsible person to hand out throughout the event so you're not responsible the night of your wedding handing out envelopes. Now let's get started breaking down each vendor by type, starting with hair and makeup. Now hair and makeup is one of those vendors that we said it kind of is an exception to the rule. They have their pricing for their standard services, but then they do require tipping on top of that, normally 99% of the time, and expect that to go directly to the artist the day of the service. Tipping a hair and makeup artist is similar to tipping at a salon, 15 to 20%. You can put it in one envelope if there's more than one artist, and then they can divide it up amongst themselves. Or if you know the number of artists going into it, just put them in separate envelopes so you can distribute them individually. Next up, photographers and florists. This is a category that often is debated and often overlooked by couples, mainly because it can get a little bit confusing. Photographers and florists tend to own their own company. And there's a belief that if you own your own company, your pricing should reflect your services and you should not count on tips to compensate. Now, there's nothing wrong with that argument. There's validity in that argument, and I believe in that argument. However, I also believe that small business owners are some of the hardest working people you will ever meet. So if your expectations are exceeded, if they go above and beyond and provide that extraordinary service, I do believe that they still warrant a tip. And my suggested tip amount for a photographer or florist is $50 to $100 per photographer or $50 to $100 to the lead florist. Tipping your officiant. Tipping an officiant can get a little bit tricky because there are multiple tiers of involvement within this particular category. Now, if you are having your wedding at a religious institution, a church, a synagogue, anything that is an organized religious institution, they typically require a donation or a rental fee. And within that donation or rental fee, there is a religious officiant associated with that fee. Now that's all encompassing, and that's kind of just considered a donation to the organization, and that's fairly easy. Where it gets a little complicated is these days you have religious organizations, churches or synagogues that rent out their facility, but then you bring in your own officiant. So you're not only making a donation to the religious organization, but you're also making a donation and or paying a fee to an officiant associated with another religious affiliation. Now, normally that's still pretty cut and dry where each one has assigned fees and you're paying a known amount. Where it gets even another layer of complication is if you're having a religious organization host your ceremony, but then bringing in either a non-denominational or an outside affiliated officiant, and they have their own separate fees, then possibly that vendor was where your tipping would come in. That vendor, if you're paying them, if they're a organized officiant business, where it's a company where their sole purpose is providing officiant services, those vendors, we do suggest a tip amount anywhere from $50 to $100, or oftentimes couples for officiants, especially because they're bonding with them throughout the process, might offer a non-monetary gift in place of a financial tip. In the category of music, there's several different ways that couples will tend to structure their musical vendors. Either solo artist providing ceremony music, a trio providing cocktail music, and then a DJ providing reception music. Or they're bringing in a band for the reception, or they're having a solo artist throughout. No matter how you slice that pie, our tip suggestion for musical vendors are as follows. If you have a musician providing music, that if they're a part of a group, we suggest $15 to $30 per musician. If they are a solo artist, we suggest anywhere from $30 to $50 per solo artist. For a band, for the reception, we suggest anywhere from $20 to $50 per musician or per band member, because sometimes there's techs or things like that. We do believe that they should be included in that tip amount. And then if you're getting down to a DJ and just a solo DJ, we suggest anywhere from $50 to $100 for a DJ. For transportation, remember, is another one of those vendors who more likely than not will have a tip amount either worked into their contract or proposal, or it'll be a designated tip requirement to be delivered to the driver. So make sure to read your contract carefully and know if there's something that is expected of you there, so there are no penalties that apply. If you do not have a contract or proposal that includes a required tip amount, our suggestion is $50 to $100 per driver for transportation services. For venue coordinators, aka the people who work at the venue on your behalf, we suggest $50 to $100 if they are solely acting as the venue coordinator and you have an outside coordinator handling the other details. If the venue coordinator is acting as your planner or day of event manager, then we suggest anywhere from $150 to $300 for that person. Now, a more involved number to figure out is how much to tip your reception staff. Your reception staff is servers, bartenders, chefs, a maitre d' or lead banquet server. All those roles fall within this category. Now, if you're lucky, your caterer and or venue will have this as a determined amount on your final bill. It'll just be a line item right there, so you don't have to do any calculations. You just know what to pay. If that does not happen, some venues these days still have some helpful sort of spreadsheet or form that will tell you their preferred amounts for their staff, and then also tell you how many people will be working your wedding, so you can easily just plug in the numbers and come up with your own calculation in that capacity. If neither of those easy options happen, unfortunately, you're going to have to do the maths. And if you're having to do the math, our suggested tip amounts are $15 to $25 per server, $50 to $100 per chef, 10 to 15% of the liquor bill to be split evenly amongst the bartenders. Now, a lot of venues these days take lump sums and they do the splitting up for you. That's why it is important to find out from your venue or caterer what they prefer so that you can just meet expectations accordingly. A lot of venues that I speak to these days actually say, the lump sum is the preferred method. That way they can just handle it on the back end. It's less envelopes and things like that to concern themselves with. Additionally, a lot of venues that I talk to have a tip amount ranging from 1% to 2% of final food and beverage bill, which is very different than what is out there in the top wedding blogs. A lot of the top wedding blogs will say 10 to 20% of food and beverage bill. That is a drastic difference between 1 to 2%. So finding out a suggested amount from your venue or caterer is the way to go. It will save you some money in that capacity, that you're not going so far above expectations that you're harming your own bottom line. Finally, we come to wedding planners, coordinators, and day of event managers. There's a lot of names for us out there. While it feels a little bit presumptuous to be tackling this particular category because we've fallen it ourselves, we get asked this question all the time and would be remiss if we did not tackle it with 100% transparency. Now, the normal rate of tipping for a wedding planner is 5 to 15% of total wedding budget. There are a couple different things there that you need to take into consideration though. How long has that planner been with you? What services did you book them for? Did they exceed those expectations? Did they go above and beyond? Like, when you got the contract and you were reading all those line items, did they go above and beyond those services? Those are all things to take into consideration. Also remembering with this particular tip, this tip gets distributed amongst the whole planning team, not just going to one particular person within the team, or at least it should. That varies company to company. Another thing to consider, something that is also equally as valuable to us as planners, particularly in my own business, are reviews. For us, they are worth their weight in gold. Hearing from other couples about their planning experiences, why they loved working with us, why they suggest us to any couple considering a planner is absolutely key in booking future business and getting those referrals coming in. And we couldn't be more appreciative of that. That's something that we suggest for all couples, is going back and really making sure to be generous with your reviews and your testimonials for each of your vendors if you feel that they went above and beyond the services, because that really is what helps us grow as small businesses, and that's what helps us put food on the table, and we're always appreciative of that. Some general things to remember as you are preparing your tips for your wedding. Main thing, budget. Make sure you're thinking about this in advance of the week of your wedding. Put it as a line item in your budget so that it is absolutely something that is planned out and proactively thought about versus reactionary and something you're stressing about 3 days before your wedding. Don't let that happen. Prepare. Make sure to have all your tips organized prior to wedding day. That way you're not having to run around and scramble and forget tips or lose money because you weren't sure where you put it. Get those tips in envelopes, get them to your wedding planner if you have one. If not, get them to a responsible party. And finally, remember that there are some cash tips alternatives or something to do in conjunction with a cash tip: reviews, testimonials. Get those positive words out towards the vendors that work with you. They bust their butt off to make sure your day happens as beautifully as you dreamed, and they deserve to be recognized and acknowledged for that. Whew! That was a lot to cover. Hope it was super helpful and it helped you answer some of those not so fun money questions as you go into planning your budget for your wedding. Remember, bottom line, tipping is a personal choice. However you choose to tip your vendors is up to you. And just because you tip one vendor does not mean you need to tip them all. It's your decision. You're in control. Best of luck. Thanks for tuning in, guys.